A couple of weeks ago, we saw David in a similar situation with basically time on his hands, and I gave the picture of the palace roof, and it was kind of stark. Of course, if it was on a roof, there was going to be no paintings or fancy carpet. But he was out on the balcony, very stark, and the balcony was very big, and David was very small. So David was at loose ends. And for a king who has been a warrior for all of his life, hunting down the wicked, being chased by his adversaries, King Saul, he was used to a very active life. So when he came back and became king, and there was a great celebration of people from all over the world coming to build him a beautiful palace, there was excitement. And then there was pomp and circumstance when the Ark of the Covenant was brought into Jerusalem. All that excitement, all these things that David was used to. And then he would come a time with idle hands. And it's kind of like a child, when a child's been playing and then you ask a child to sit still for a good length of time, that child may not be behaving very well. Any of us ever experienced that with our children? Sit still. They kind of get antsy after a while. And so how it is with David. But in this instance, it's a little bit different. In the first instance, David had a great idea to serve his Lord. I'm going to build you a big, beautiful house because I have a house. And the Lord, in so many words, granted that to him. It wasn't going to be right now. It would be a little bit later. But once again, we have a similar circumstances that David has some time on his hands. And he's pacing back and forth. Really nothing to do. He had sent Joab, his right-hand person, and all the Israelites had set out into war. But for whatever reason, David stayed behind. Usually he would go out leading the way. Perhaps he felt like, well, now I'm king of this kingdom. I'm too important. I need to stay behind and attend to the affairs of our nation. But for whatever reason, David decided his status or his being was not fit to go out into war, so he stayed behind. And we can see that he was bored of sorts, pacing back and forth. So he happened to look over a balcony and he saw a beautiful woman bathing. And he thought about how he might occupy his time. And that's really all he thought about it. He didn't think about who this woman was or who she belonged to. All he knew is he wanted this woman. So, for the sake of the reader, he says, who is this woman? And there came a reply from no distinct person. It is the daughter of Uriah. Her name is Bathsheba, which Bathsheba really means seventh daughter. So she really didn't have a name. The focus is really not supposed to be on her. She, after all, is a secondary character in this story. So we have it that David sent for her. Now in this passage, sent happens about 8 or 9 times. In this passage, we see the word sent or send. And it is a command. It is a direct command. In this passage, it kind of tempers the language down. Send, right? Send forth for Joe Smith to come here. And then, of course, the person comes. But sent is in the text itself, in the translation that it kind of leaves out, it is a direct order. Bring that person to me. And it says, okay, the person comes. Bathsheba comes, and we see the word comes, responding to a summons. But it is actually responding to a direct order. The person has no choice in the matter. There is no consent here. David orders her to come. David orders for Uriah to come. David orders for Uriah to be sent out into battle. David orders Joab to do some terrible things to Uriah. So Bathsheba comes and they have their dalliance, and he just sends her back. It was supposed to be a one-time thing that he would forget about her. After all, eventually David would have like 30 wives. What's one person? He didn't really care who she was, where she came from. Go back. And then all of a sudden, she sends word that he must know this, that she has conceived. And David has to think, well, okay, I remember this woman. Yes, I remember. She was very beautiful, and she conceives. So David, rather than David facing the truth, he conceives of a master plan, one of deception. So he calls for Uriah the Hittite, and Uriah probably was one of David's men. Hittite, he could have been a mercenary, and that is a paid military person, or he could have just been high on David's status of men. Of course, Joab was the leader. So Uriah comes back, and David cleverly says, well, how are things going in the battle? And we don't even see a response here. Uriah doesn't have a response here. And probably because it means that, it didn't really matter what he said. David had a plan. So he says, go down to your wife and wash your feet. Now, wash your feet really means go down and enjoy your wife. To enjoy all the comforts, spend the night and have a good time. But Uriah was a righteous man, full of conviction. A direct opposite of what David is right here. He says, I can't do this. My men are out in battle. My leader, my master's men are out there. A distinct contradiction here. Maybe that's where David should be. But really, the crux is that David is here in the castle. But it's a distinct difference between the two. So he goes to sleep. And so David is starting to get fidgety here, and his cleverness is not coming into plan the way it should be. So he has to devise another plan. Well, I'll have him for dinner and give him something to drink, and we'll have a good old time. And he will go and have relations with his wife, and all of this will be taken care of. But Uriah once again stood to his principles, his convictions. Now, the word Uriah means Yahweh is my light, God is my light, Yahweh is my light. So he is a man of God principle. So he sleeps at the entrance with all the master's servants. Now, by now, David is frustrated. His plans are not working out, and he has broken the law of Moses by taking another man's wife. And this perhaps is the greatest crime against the law that any man can do, is taking another man's wife. And it's punishable by death. And there was going to be evidence, a child born. Surely people knew that he had had this dalliance with Bathsheba. It's hard to keep things silent in a big castle. But, so David yet comes up with another plan. This time very evil. Maybe I should do this for the sake of all the kingdom. Sound familiar? Caiaphas, Jesus, one man's life for the sake of the kingdom. Well, David had a similar thought. So he sends Uriah out with the very message of his impending death. Sends with Uriah the message. What could be more despicable? Not even sending with somebody else the message, but Uriah himself. And he takes it to Joab and essentially gives his death sentence. This is very evil in the sight of the Lord, and David thought nothing of it at this point. He had reached this point in his life. He had been drunk with power. That is so easy to do for us who are humans. To take power and abuse it. And a great abuse of power. And it happens all the time. Now a pastor, I'm given power. All power comes from God after all. A blessing from God. Power, really, to do good. Parents have power over their children. Coaches have power over their teams. Governments have power over the people. Politicians, much to our chagrin sometimes, have power over the people. And when it is, and most of the time we can hope that they will use this power for good. But sometimes this doesn't happen. There becomes an abuse of power. Rather than what power should be to serve the people, like Jesus. He was the most powerful person that the world had ever known because he was of God. But he also was the greatest servant in the world because he gave his life willingly. He didn't want to do it. He didn't do anything wrong. But he did it for the sake of humanity, of all the world. Even though he didn't do anything wrong, he said, I am sorry. I am sorry. That's what he had to say. He had to basically admit to things that he did not do. What a great sacrifice. And that is the true meaning of being a great leader. Unconditional love, getting nothing in return, taking the blame, shouldering responsibility. Being a leader can be a great thing. It could be the Monday morning quarterback, so to speak. When things go well, the quarterback is heralded. And when things don't go well, the quarterback gets all the blame, whether they deserve it or not. But the crux of being a great leader is that unconditional love. So there are consequences. There are consequences, and we have a choice whether to accept the consequences of our actions, of what we're supposed to do, the consequences on our leadership, either to abuse it, and whatever consequences may happen, or to take the blame, and there may be consequences. So as I told the kids this morning, yes, sometimes we have to say, I'm sorry. Now, for an example, maybe there would have been some grace there if David just let it happen. Maybe he could have just said, Uriah, this is what I did. And I am so very sorry. I regret what I did. And Uriah, being a righteous man, he might have forgiven David, but David didn't give him that chance. David didn't give him the chance, didn't give Uriah the chance, instead abused his power. And it was evil in the sight of the Lord. So God had blessed David with many things, and he was used to getting blessing after blessing. And I guess he assumed he would continue getting the blessing. He was getting drunk on these blessings. And so it is our human nature to want to take more, to start grabbing. I want blessings. Keep it coming. He started grabbing, and all of a sudden, it wasn't a blessing at all. He's grasping and taking. And the taking becomes a curse, so to speak. And David, there would be serious repercussions for what he did. And we'll find that out in later week what would happen to David as a result of his dalliance with Bathsheba. So forgiveness is hard. Admitting when we're wrong sometimes is hard. I know as pastor, especially when I was at Darlington, I always had to say, I'm sorry, I did something wrong. And it seemed like I was new as being a pastor. I made a lot of mistakes. And I continually had to say, I'm sorry. And there was forgiveness. They were very forgiving people. And I eventually learned to be a little bit better. But there are also sometimes the instances, well, I don't really feel like I'm in the wrong. I'm pastor, I'm leader, I don't really feel like I'm wrong in this circumstances. And as pastor, I have power to say, no, I didn't. But what I can do is I can see the frustration on each and every one of our hearts, maybe here sometime, or our friends out in the community, or even right here. I can see the frustration. I can see it. And so God places on my heart, saying, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I am sorry. I am sorry. And I feel it in my heart. I feel a sense of compassion, and that's grace. That's God helping me along in this process. I am sorry. And then I can see the pain on the person's face. I may not understand it. Perhaps I did cause this person pain. And I'm sorry I did. I really am. And the grace also is when the relief comes to the person's face. And then, even more so, I ask for forgiveness, and I really mean it. I don't know what I did to cause this person harm, but maybe I did do something. Maybe initially I didn't feel like I did anything wrong, but this person is in pain. What can I do as leader to make this person feel better? And that's to say, I'm sorry. I could very well have been. I am a leader. I oversee a lot of people. I make mistakes. Sometimes I don't see things maybe I could have seen. And so generally, when I say I'm sorry to you, I really mean it. I may not understand exactly what I've done. But, love is unconditional. We love each other. And God will place grace in each of our hearts when we say, I'm sorry, even for doing something terrible or not so terrible. To ask for forgiveness. And that is the grace that God places in our hearts. Amen.